go ahead and get started. So we have Landon back with Wichita Live. He will also give his 2-minute speech, whatever. And Alex, so here we go.
My name is Landon. My wife Candace and I run Wichita Life, which is social media platforms. We have a podcast, which is kind of why I'm up here today, and an email newsletter, the Wichita Life Update, that we send out 3 times a week with local news, events, and kind of everything Wichita, so that you can stay up to date on everything going on in town in 5 minutes rather than trying to dig through a bunch of sources. So if you want to sign up for that, go to wichitalifeict.com, and you can sign up for that there. Today we are here to hear from Alex Harb. Alex, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
He started Ribbit, or RBS IT Solutions, and Meddys, among other things, and so we're going to kind of dive into his story a little bit, but please welcome Alex.
Hey.
Comfy chairs up here today. So I interviewed you for my podcast back in May of 2020.
Yeah.
And so if we all think back to where we were at in May of 2020, we were probably locked in our house because it was kind of a different world back then.
Yes.
But before we get to that, before we get to Ribbit and Meddys, tell us a little bit about coming to the US, coming to Wichita from Lebanon.
Yes, so it was August 16 of 2000. This is when my plane landed in the flatland of Kansas, in Wichita, Kansas. So I came as an international student, which I went to Wichita State University, WSU, as a computer science student, and that's how it all started. And I loved it. I actually, a couple of years after I was in Wichita, I went away to another bigger city, and I couldn't wait to get back to Wichita. I don't know what it is. It's everybody. A lot of people I talk to, they complain about Wichita being boring, but I think it's the best place on the planet, honestly.
Yes.
I really miss it every time I leave. So.
100%. What was the hardest part about leaving home and coming to Wichita?
It was just mainly missing the family, you know, missing my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters. And but other than that, you know, I couldn't be happier because I just came to the land of opportunity. So, you know, there was nothing else that was, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Did anybody follow you over here, or was your whole family back in Lebanon?
I got married to my wife in 2013, and she's from Lebanon, and she lives. We have 3 children now. She lives with me here. So
Awesome. So, if any, what preconceived notions did you have? Did you know anything about Wichita, or what did you think about the U.S. before you came over?
Well, I knew America from watching movies, right? So I was expecting to find tall buildings. I actually hid my money inside this pouch on my belly because I thought I was going to get robbed. So it was just whatever I knew from the movies, the big cities, and you know the police chases and all that. So when I came to Wichita, I thought I was coming to a village. And so it was not what I was expecting.
Sure.
You know.
And so you went to Wichita State for computer science. What was the plan after school? What were you thinking?
I was just, I mean, while I was going to college, I thought I was just going to be like a programmer or, you know, computer science engineer at a tech company. And while I was going to college, to school, I realized that wasn't me. That wasn't what I wanted to do. So that's when I started. I mean, a couple years into it, I realized that that's not what I actually want to do for the rest of my life, you know. So that's when I started exploring other options.
Sure. And walk us through what kind of the first steps were. Where did you work at through college, and kind of what was the first thing after you got
So while I was going to college, I waited on tables at Red Rock Canyon Grill, and I was a student test engineer at, right now it's called NetApp. It used to be LSILogic. And I was a student test engineer, and I truly loved waiting on tables way more than, you know, doing what I was supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. I hated it so much to where I really fell asleep on my desk half the time. And one day I was working in the lab, and my boss, I had this boss, his name was Bernard Chan. He was from Malaysia. He's the nicest guy on the planet. I've never met a nicer guy than this guy, than Bernard. And he was walking, giving a tour to some of the customers, and I mean, NetApp or LSILogic, a customer talking, they're probably about to spend, you know, $50 million, $100 million, and he was giving a tour in the testing lab, and they came to my area that was in the corner, and I woke up to him explain him. I was so embarrassed, and he didn't say a single word to me. He just kept going, and I saw him in the hallway a couple of days later. He totally ignored it. I was expecting to get fired. I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna do this to him and to myself. I'm just gonna do it. You know, so I was just so embarrassed of myself that I decided I'm just gonna do what's gonna keep me awake all the time. You know, so it wasn't interesting enough, it wasn't challenging enough. I was just supposed to run these tests and fill out the Excel sheets. So I did my work and I fell asleep every time. So I decided that I'm gonna go do something that's gonna actually keep me awake all the time. So I quit my job at Red Rock and I quit my job at LSI and I started looking for the next adventure, and of course I didn't have any money. So I borrowed money, maxed out my credit cards, and opened a small 800 square feet computer store on Lincoln and Oliver. So you want to keep going, tell you the whole story?
Yeah.
So I did okay. I remember I didn't have any savings. I didn't really, you know, I always spent what I made. And I started out with like about $40,000 worth of inventory, and I bought some used shelves from a Target that was going out of business. And I set them up in this place. I laid the carpet in the place, and 6 months into it, I had $20,000 in inventory. That means that I ate the other 20. You know, I sold them and I ate them. I used them to, you know, go buy food and live. And then I got lucky with something. There was a computer store that was on Lincoln and Woodlawn that was called National Computers. They shut down overnight. And that store had been there for 15 years. So I immediately talked to the landlord that owned that shopping center, and I moved my store over there. My sales overnight went from like $18,000 a month to $150,000 a month. And just overnight, just moving from one corner to another. And that's when it started. I mean, life got better all of a sudden. So I grew from there. I expanded to 8 computer stores, and I did so well all the way until 2010. And I would say 2012. I don't know, you remember, I mean, when the iPhone came out around 2008, it didn't really get that many users until 2010, 2011. Before that, if you needed to apply for a job or something, you really needed a computer, you needed a printer, you needed a scanner. And when smartphones came out, people didn't really need computers to check their email anymore. You know, they didn't need laptops. So the environment was changing, and my business was slowing down. I wasn't selling as many computers and printers and, you know, scanners anymore. So I started having a hard time with business, you know. So I didn't know how to pivot. What happened was, when I did so well, I've always been a hard worker. I was a hard worker. I've always worked a lot of hours, but I didn't really have the business skills and tools to pivot my business when, you know, the BlackBerry was not the only option to check your email. You know, if you wanted a smartphone, it was only like, if you had a BlackBerry, you were a business person, right? So I started having a hard time because my sales were declining and I was losing employees and, you know, so on and so forth. And that's because the fact that I was very successful, I went from, you know, small computer store to 8 because I just got lucky. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I had a product and somebody needed my product. You know, but when the environment changed, I really didn't have the skills and tools to shift with the environment, so I failed. And I failed miserably. It was, but it was a good opportunity, you know, so that's when I started. I said, okay, I'm gonna go into the restaurant business. I got into IHOP, I bought into Golden Corral, and that didn't work out either because I was actually not that good of a business person. I just got lucky, but I thought I was really good, right? So Warren Buffett says it best. He says that success is the enemy of future success. So a lot of business owners, when they start a business, I would say 90% of them, they actually get lucky. They happen to be the right person, the right place at the right time, and they get lucky. And when the environment change on them, and that's when they don't know how to change, they don't know how to shift. So being so successful with the first try gave me the illusion that I was really, really good. But the truth was that I was not. I had no idea what I was doing. So I was a hard worker. I wasn't lazy, but that was it. So I got into the restaurant business. I failed. I just kept digging myself deeper and deeper and deeper. And life didn't really turn around for me until I sought help. I came to realization that, hey, I'm not good at this. Obviously, I'm failing. Other people are winning. And I need to help myself. So I started reading books. I started reaching out to people to coach me. And I finally found somebody to coach me. And I read a lot of books. And I started figuring out what I needed to do. So.
What were some of the skills that you think you were missing, or what were the resources that you sought then? You said you had some mentors or books. Do you have any specifics there?
Well, so we all have our own DNA. So what applies to me doesn't really apply to everyone, because there's my DNA is I'm a technical guy. I'm not a sales guy. So if you have me take a personality test, I'm not a persuader. You know what I'm saying? A salesperson is a persuader. A salesperson can run a team better than I can, because they can persuade people. They can persuade them into doing the right thing. Every business owner at the end of the day has we all have the same desired outcome, is we want our team to be successful so we can be successful. You know, we all wake up in the morning with an internal desire to want to be very, very successful. But whether we get there or not, that's a different story. So to me, what I was really lacking was the skills to nurture my team and nurture my customers. You know what I'm saying? Because what needed to happen when I owned a computer store and the environment started changing on me, I needed to go to my team, which is the source of all value creation, and have them help me transition to the next business or transition my business. But for some reason, I just didn't have that skill to go to them, or maybe it was too much ego or something. So I tried to figure it out myself, and it was kind of like a trial and error process. So, and it didn't work. So if you ask me what is it that you learned from failing, I would say I learned that my team is absolutely the source of all value creation, and they are the ones that are going to take me places. So I always say that the success of my business is 100% dependent on who I hire and who I don't fire.
Did you always have an itch to start a business? So you kind of, LSILogic, you're falling asleep, you're serving tables. Starting your own business is kind of a big step.
Well, I knew I wanted to be, when you wait on tables, I was a very successful waiter, right? Because every day was different. The more you took care of the guests, the more money you made in tips. So I was really, really attracted to that. Like when I was 22 years old, I'd rather work for 20 hours waiting on tables than go sit on the desk for 2 hours. So that was just part of my DNA, that I wasn't, I didn't have the personality to do repetitive things every day. I needed to be challenged more, and that's why I was more successful as a waiter than as an engineer. So now to go back to your question about the books, a couple of books I really recommend is The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek and Measure What Matters by John Doerr. So those are a couple of good books to read.
Cool, thank you. So you failed initially. You
Yes.
starting to get into the restaurant game, but Ribbit is still around. So
Yes.
talk us through kind of what the next step was and how you got it to be a success.
Well, it all started with an apology letter. I sent an apology email to all my staff, and I said, I failed you, I'm sorry, I owe you an apology. And I laid it out as 5 pages of email, and I said, here's what I'm trying to do, and here's what I want to go. And are you with me, and can you help me out? And that was the start of the change, you know. The change didn't really happen overnight. It's still, when you stop learning is when you stop growing. I'm still learning something new every day. But I really things really got better for me when I had clarity on the concept of the yellow brick road to success, is what I call it. So when you bring someone on board, it's actually the start of a relationship, it's not an event. So a lot of us think that when we hire someone, it's an event. I need to write a software, so I'm gonna go hire a software engineer. A lot of us think that this is it. We make the hire, we make him fill out the W-2 and the I-9 forms, and the event is over. It's actually the start of the relationship. And so that was, ever since I started building the yellow brick road for my team, that's when things started improving. And they really, I mean, if I was to put, things really started improving for me at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. That's when I was still seeking help and learning things. Really didn't 100% turn around until like mid-2020 for me. That's when I was like, okay, so this is another, actually when COVID happened, I said, this is another failure for me, here you go. I shut down all my restaurants, and it's time for me to turn this thing around and not just feel victim of whatever, and just really learn from it and get better from the situation. So that's when things really turn around.
For sure. I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about Meddys, but first, who has been to Meddys? Raise your hand. Awesome. If you haven't had it, there's some over there. Who's been to Meddys in the last month or so? Who had Meddys last night? All right. So I do want to talk about Meddys a little bit. So what was the vision behind Meddys? So from our last podcast, I believe you said something along the lines of, if I can figure out the computer business, I can figure out the restaurant business. So what was the inspiration for it, and kind of how did that get started?
Well, that's when I was really, excuse my language, cocky, and I thought I was really good. So I thought I was really good, and I'm just gonna figure it out. Actually, Meddys was a nightmare for about 3 years. It was literally a nightmare. I was really stressed out. My car smelled like food 24/7. Every bit of my clothes had an oil stain on it. And I was a really bad cook. I'm a very bad cook. I hate standing. I hate standing on the line cooking food. I don't have passion for food. I eat a lot, but I really don't have passion for food, man. So, Meddys was a nightmare for 3 years. What was the question again?
What was the inspiration for Meddys?
Well, so Meddys, it started out me thinking that I was really good, that whatever I touched was gonna turn into gold. That's how it started out, right? And it turned out that was not the case. So there was a need for a Mediterranean chain, that is acceptable by the majority of people. Yes, we do talk about authentic, and if you, I always talk about this. If you go on Facebook right now and ask who's got the best burrito, right? Who makes the best burrito? It's always gonna be this small hole-in-the-wall restaurant on West 21st Street in Waco or something, right? Everybody is gonna vote for that place. But here in Wichita, I can tell you, nobody in the history of mankind ever sold or is ever selling right now or will ever sell more burritos than Chipotle, right? Yeah, Chipotle would not get a single vote on social media for having the best burrito. It's gonna be some small hole-in-the-wall restaurant. But at the end of the day, Chipotle is serving 7,000 people a day, and that hole in the restaurant is gonna get about 75. You know what I'm saying? So I wanted to create a chain that sell Mediterranean food, because I saw a lack from the Mediterranean cuisine in the market, just that I can expand across the country, that was accepted to the majority of the population. That was the whole inspiration behind Meddys back then.
Yeah, sure. And so where did you start? Was it one location? How did you start in Wichita, and where are you at right now?
So I started Meddys on Herring and Rock Road. It looked like a Chipotle, and like I said, it struggled for about 3 years. We had a lot of issues, and the main problem with it was we had a good lunch business, but there was nobody at dinner time. It was just, the place was just empty at dinner time. So I I could not, it was really stressful because you're only doing one meal a day and you cannot sustain a restaurant operation doing one meal a day. Now you can sustain it if you just want to spend the rest of your life cooking shawarmas and serving hummus, but I don't have passion for food, so I was hating my life, so I didn't really enjoy cooking. I had to stand on the line and cook myself for 3 years because I had no idea what I was doing, so I had to learn it. And before I started it, I thought I was just gonna hire a couple chefs that are gonna write the recipe book, and life was just gonna be good for me. But that was not the case. So in the food business, there's two types of food. There's a food that you make in less than a minute, which is like a turkey sandwich or whatever you like a hamburger. You can actually make a hamburger in less than a minute. Or there's a food that you make in the morning and hold on a steam table for the whole day. Those two types of food, you can have the best recipe for the best plate, but there's difference between the food that you cook and serve right away, and when you have to hold it on a steam table for 12 hours, what is it gonna taste like? What is it gonna look like? So that was a challenge for me. It wasn't just a matter of finding a good recipe. It had to be a good recipe that works. It had to be a recipe that you can either cook in under a minute or cook and hold for the whole day, and still, maintain the same quality that you wanted to maintain. So
Makes sense. It's interesting that you kind of went into it thinking you wanted to start a chain,
yes.
rather than just like a single restaurant. So what do you have to think about ahead of time? Like, what are the values? What kind of culture do you have to build to kind of make sure that it's scalable?
So when I started Meddys, I didn't know anything about culture, right? So, and I totally thought that what was very important for me to find the .com, Meddys.com, I thought that was very important, and like I said, it was kind of like the recipe book, but it turned out that culture was very important, but I realized that actually Meddys is nothing without having great culture, So right now, if you ask me what is Meddys, I tell you it's a team of exceptional people that go above and beyond and push beyond their limits on a daily basis. That's what Meddys is. It's not actually the product, it's not the recipe, it's not the drinks that we sell, it's the people that are running the Meddys. That's what Meddys is comprised of. So what is gonna make Meddys successful or uber successful is gonna be the team that's running it. And the more challenge that team gets, the more successful they get, that the more Meddys is gonna get. So right now that's how I think about Meddys. Back then I didn't really think. I was confused all over the place, but now that's what I believe is gonna really take Meddys to the next level.
Sure. And just to double back, how many locations in Wichita and what other cities are you in?
We have 5 locations in Wichita. We just opened 1 location in Kansas City, and they're all doing really, really well, thanks God. So the one in Kansas City is actually really, really, really successful. It just exceeded every expectation.
Sure. And are there big plans? I mean, this year?
This year we just signed. We bought 2 properties and we leased 3 more properties. So there'll be 5 more stores by the first quarter of next year.
So, like I mentioned, the first time I interviewed was May of 2020. So tell us a little about how you had to pivot. You talked a little bit about Ribbit, but how you had to pivot Meddys during 2020 with the shutdowns and everything else. How did you kind of either take advantage, or how did you have to innovate, adapt?
So there's 2 things that I really got from COVID. That's the first issue we had. It was actually a quick fix. It was the curbside business. I had been trying to figure out the curbside business for literally 3 years, and COVID happened. And the minute COVID happened, I shut down. I was the first restaurant to shut down my restaurants in Wichita. And I started construction immediately and doing side doors and did professional signs. Didn't have any buckets with dirt in them and just a piece of paper with writing on it. I did professional signs, and I heard this podcast. This guy was talking about COVID and how this is gonna be the new norm. It's not really gonna take over the world, but we're gonna get something out of COVID that's gonna stay with us for the longest time. And he gave an example about, I can't remember his name, the guy that ran Chrysler in the 70s when he went to the government and borrowed money. Chrysler had to be bailed out by the government, and that was a really big no-no from the federal government, that hey, we're the federal government, we don't bail out the private businesses. And ever since then, now every time something happened, the government comes in with helicopter money and they bail them out. So the fact that it did happen, that was gonna make it happen again. So whether it's this year or next year, you never know. So I started thinking about how can I position my business to sustain another COVID. And we all know that this is gonna pass, it's gonna be behind us at one point. But how can I build my business and pivot my business to where it can sustain another Meddys? And I don't know if you remember Mother's Day in 2020, if you went out to any restaurant, they had probably had 50 to curbside orders, to go orders, and nobody knew whose order was. Everybody wanted to buy food on Mother's Day in 2020. We did, 1,500 people that day with 6 minutes ticket time.
Wow.
And that we really aced it, and that's because we start of March, like middle of March when COVID happened, by middle of April, we literally perfected that game, and we were able to perform. Now, as soon as we were over the COVID issue and the curbside, we're still 50% of our business until today is still curbside. So we came to that employment issue, right? So we shut down all my stores, and all my kids stayed with me, but I had 10 managers that were the front of the house managers. Kennedy got pregnant, Stephanie got pregnant, and Ali moved to Alaska with her boyfriend. I mean, that's what happened. And another one, she graduated and she became a nurse. So I had no managers. And trying to hire people after COVID, it was a nightmare. I mean, we were in a position, you have to beg people to come apply, you have to beg them to come and interview, you have to beg them to come and train, and then you have to beg them to do their job. And how can you hold them accountable when you're in the begging business, right? So I was paying people $12 an hour. I said, listen, these are extreme circumstances. I gotta figure something out. I gotta figure out an extreme solution. So there's been a study that's been done a million times, and it's always been when companies go and ask employees what the 10 important things to them for them to keep their job. And pay has always ranked number 4 or 5, right? Now, employers always thought that pay was the answer, but the employees thought something different. Snag a Job did a survey in March of 2021, and they asked 4,000 restaurant employees why they quit their job. One of the people said that, well, the main answer was, the main answer was, the number one reason was the money, right? And around the same time, there was a lot of drama going on social media, how restaurants don't pay living wage, is what they call it. So I figured, okay, so I'm gonna get ahead of this problem. I'm not gonna offer somebody $12 an hour, I'm gonna pay them $20 an hour. And that's when everybody was paying 10 and $2.13 an hour and 12 and 11, and I'm gonna pay them 20, and for bartenders, I'm gonna pay them $25 an hour. And I had no idea how I was gonna be able to pay for that increase in expense, because I guarantee you I wasn't making $1 million a month, so I didn't really have all that extra money to spend on wages. But I was like, I'm just gonna do it. If it doesn't work, I'm just gonna shut down. I'm not gonna be begging people to come into work. I mean, it's that simple. So immediately overnight, we got traction from that, and we had a backlog of like 1,000 applicants. What also happened at that time was we got so many calls. Ironically, everybody on my team all of a sudden remembered their job description. So everybody that was working in the restaurant remembered that they remember what to do. Because trust me when I tell you, you cannot, when we are given the choice whether we have to work or we don't work, it's our nature to take the path of least resistance. So when everybody on your team thinks that, hey, this guy can never get rid of me because he can't find employees, they're just simply not gonna do the work. I'll probably behave the same way if I was in their position. So when the next day the phone started ringing, are you guys still hiring? Are you guys still hiring? Everybody on the team remembered their job description. I swear to God. So, and that was the biggest game changer. That was the best decision I've ever made, because it changed the culture of the business and everything. 20 years ago, you used to, let me back up a little bit. Ever since Google got in business, right? Ever since people started reading about Google, we started reading about how Google do their laundry for their employees, and then how they build the nap rooms, and how they have jelly bean in the break room, and how they give them 4.5-hour energy drink. And we started seeing these surveys on LinkedIn about the best to work for companies, and the litmus test has been is how many perks do they do for their team? Are they able to bring their dog to work? Do they have nap rooms? Do they give back massages? You know, none of the surveys have been about how many challenges they put them through, how much accountability, what kind of results they get to produce. Because 99% of us wake up in the morning with an internal desire to want to be successful. We all subconsciously want to go to work and actually make $1 million, not really go have a 4-hour energy drink in the break room.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So 20 years ago, the relationship between employer and employee was, I have a job, you want the job, I really need you more than you need me. I, the employer, need you more than you need me, but I only need you if you are able to take me places. You know what I'm saying? I will not need you just because you look good. So when I changed the relationship with my business, all of a sudden, we didn't have to have, I call it the brain damage conversation. You know what I'm saying? The conversation to where, hey, you're not even doing your job, what we have to do. You know what I'm saying? So, with all the talk about the perks and all the best work for companies, there's a very fine military organization on the planet. The finest military organization is called the Navy SEALs. And the Navy SEALs are very successful, and they are absolutely the finest, not because they get to bring the dog to work, not because they have a jelly bean in the break room, because they have pork rind jerkies, because they give back massages. Because those guys, they get the right people in place, they train the heck out of them, they hold them accountable, and they're proud of the results. And those guys, they hold each other accountable, because if you're on the Navy SEALs team and you make a mistake, somebody's life is in jeopardy. Right? So they have to hold each other accountable. They are successful because they hold them to a very high standard, and those guys love to be challenged and love to win. So you join the Navy SEALs and you stay in the Navy SEALs, not because of the person they give you, because you get addicted to winning. You know what I'm saying? So that's what if you ask me, what do you want to do with Meddys? My dream is to build a team that gets up in the morning, work in unison for